They say the Bitterroot Range keeps what it takes. Snow buries the lost, wind smooths over the trails, and silence falls like a judgment. When Jonah Callahan vanished up there last winter, nobody expected him back. Not whole, not warm, not alive. Mara Callahan stood on the porch of her ranch house, one booted foot on the top step, steam curling from her coffee tin. The morning was pale with cold. Snow glittered across the hills like crushed glass, and the peaks beyond held the same indifferent stillness they had a year ago when her husband rode into them and didn't return. Folks in town said he froze to death trying to bring back strayed cattle. The kind of death that doesn't leave a body, just a story and a widow. She didn't weep anymore. The grief had settled into something like stone inside her, hard and cold, but not brittle. She ran the ranch alone now, what little was left of it. Her hands were chapped, her shoulders lean, and her eyes dark with the weight of winter. She didn't speak much in town. Didn't need to. People offered her that strange, quiet respect they give to those who've suffered visibly and endured. That morning, she saw it before she even noticed the gate had swung open. Jonah's coat. It hung on the old gatepost, like someone had just arrived home and taken it off. The buffalo hide duster, worn down one sleeve, a stitched-up tear just above the left pocket, where he'd caught it on barbed wire 2 winters ago. No one else had a coat like that. No one else could have hung it there. Mara set the coffee down slowly. Her breath was a ghost in the air. She walked to the gate, boots crunching the frost-hardened snow. Her hand hovered over the coat. It was heavy with ice, but the collar, where the fabric met the wood, was warm. Not blood-warm, fire-warm, as if someone had just slipped it off. She jerked her hand back and looked around. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign of a horse or man. The snow lay unbroken in every direction except the tracks she'd made just now. The wind rose behind her, brushing her skirt, whistling like a whisper through the bare aspens. Her heart beat slow and thick in her chest. She took the coat and slung it over her arm, turned without a word, and walked back inside. By noon she was in Saddle Creek, tying off her mule at the hitching post outside the sheriff's office. The townsfolk watched her pass, some offering cautious nods, others whispering behind gloved hands. She carried the coat under one arm, folded tight like a message she hadn't read yet. Sheriff Briggs looked up from his desk when she entered. He was a wide man with a beard that always looked half-frozen and eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. He leaned back and set down his pencil. "If this is about taxes, Mara, I told you I'd give you time." She dropped the coat on the desk. Briggs stared at it, then up at her. "You find that in a chest or something?" "Thought we cleaned out all of Jonah's gear." "It was on my gate this morning." He frowned. "Gate?" She said nothing. Somebody's pulling a cruel joke. There were no tracks. "That coat's been gone a year. You think it walked back by itself?" "I think someone wants me to know he's not dead." Briggs sighed and stood. He lifted the coat, examined it, then sniffed. "Still smells like smoke and horses. Warm, you say?" She nodded. "Maybe someone found it. One of the mountain boys. Maybe it ain't his." "It's his." "Mara." She turned before he could offer more pity. She was halfway down the steps when a low voice caught her ear. "That coat come down off the ridge." She looked over. An old man leaned against the post beside the saloon, wrapped in a gray shawl and a lifetime of regrets. Whitaker. Tracker. Drunk. Spent half his years lost in the hills, and the other half pretending he never left them. "I seen a coat like that," he said. "3 nights back. North of Iron Pass." She stepped toward him. "Where?" "Near the cave forks. I was running a trap line. Saw a shape in the trees. Tall. Still. Watching. Then it was gone." "You sure it wasn't just wind in the trees?" "I know wind. This thing had eyes." Briggs came out behind her, arms crossed. "Don't feed her that kind of talk, Whit. She's had enough ghosts." Whitaker spat into the snow. "Ain't a ghost if it leaves behind footprints." "I thought you said it vanished." "I said I saw it. I didn't say I stayed long enough to ask questions." Mara met the old man's gaze. There was something in his expression she hadn't seen in anyone else's. Not fear. Not pity. Recognition. You think it's him? She asked. I think something up there don't want to be found, but it's letting itself be seen. That means something. Briggs scoffed. This is mountain madness. Whitaker shrugged. Madness is when you ignore a sign after it's knocked on your door. Mara looked down at the coat in her arms, fingers brushing the stitched seam on the pocket. Later that evening, she sat by the fire, the coat hanging from a chair across from her. Wind moaned along the eaves. The stove hissed. Her eyes never left the coat. He'd promised he'd come back. She remembered his words. Said if the mountain ever tried to take him, he'd carve his way out with his bare hands. Most folks thought he'd lied. Mara was no longer so sure. The next morning, Mara saddled the black gelding Jonah had broken the year before he disappeared, a broad-shouldered beast named Smoke, half Mustang, with temper to match. He hadn't been ridden much since Jonah vanished, not by anyone. But when she pulled the cinch tight and swung into the saddle, Smoke didn't flinch, just gave her a single sidelong glance, as if he remembered the weight of the one who used to ride ahead and accepted who held the reins now. The mountains to the north were cloaked in low clouds, peaks like jagged teeth biting into the sky. Frost laced the trees like spider silk. Snow crunched beneath Smoke's hooves as Mara rode past the edge of her land, past the last line of barbed wire, and into the thinning forest. She carried the coat in her saddlebag, tight-folded and close to her spine. No one tried to stop her. They'd seen that look in her eye before, the one that made even the sheriff keep his warnings behind his teeth. If the mountain had taken Jonah, Mara meant to take him back. She rode until the valley narrowed into a winding pass marked by old game trails and the broken prints of elk. As the sun rose behind her, long shadows slipped between the pines. Her breath came in sharp, visible bursts. She had packed light, rifle, canteen, jerky, and a small leather pouch of things Jonah used to carry when he tracked predators. Sulfur, matches, charcoal, and a strip of mirror. Things made for tricks and survival. As she climbed, the trees thinned. The snow deepened. Twice, she dismounted to lead Smoke along narrow ridges where the trail had crumbled. A hawk circled once overhead and vanished into the pale sky. By dusk, she reached the first fork Whitaker had mentioned, two trails splitting like a broken wishbone. One led deeper into the dark forest. The other angled higher toward the cliffs. Mara followed the higher path. Up here, everything was wind and stone. The trees grew crooked and stunted, their roots gripping rocks like desperate fingers. And then, as she rounded a bend, she saw it. A set of tracks. Boot prints. Pressed into the snow. Wide-heeled and deep, made by someone heavy. Too heavy to be hers. Too steady to be wandering game. No horse. Just a man on foot. They led up toward a ridge marked by a wall of boulders. Mara stopped and stared. The prints were fresh. Not an hour old. She felt it in her chest. That same slow thunder she'd felt the morning she found the coat. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. Something older than fear. Something like reckoning. She tied Smoke to a tree and followed the tracks on foot, rifle slung over her shoulder. The wind here howled without rhythm, rushing between the rocks as though searching for something lost. The prints led to the edge of a small clearing hemmed by dead aspens, their white trunks like bones in a shallow grave. At the far end, beneath a rock overhang, smoke curled from the mouth of a narrow cave. She crouched low, breath held. Someone was in there. Someone alive. She moved forward carefully, placing each step where the snow was packed. A shadow flickered across the cave mouth, tall, lean. A man's silhouette moved, then paused, like he'd heard something. She froze behind a fallen tree, heart hammering, every inch of her waiting. Then a voice called out, "You shouldn't be here, Mara." Her mouth went dry. She rose slowly. The figure stepped into view. He was gaunt, hollow-eyed, beard longer, streaked with frost. A cut ran through one brow. But there was no doubt. It was him. Jonah. He looked older than he should, older than the time that had passed. But it was him, her husband. Alive. Breathing. Mara didn't move. "You're supposed to be dead." He gave a slow shake of his head. "I tried to come back." "Tried. They wouldn't let me." "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the fire behind him, And she saw then, scattered across the cave floor were empty tins, a coil of rope, a rifle leaning against the wall. None of it was his. Supplies too clean to have lasted a winter. Someone had been helping him, or watching him. Jonah, her voice faltered. What happened? He didn't speak at first. Just looked past her, toward the snow behind them. They thought I'd seen too much, he said at last. Something I shouldn't have. Near the old trail, by Devil's Hollow. I saw them bury a man. 6 riders, faces covered, military saddles. One had a federal seal on his coat. Mara's stomach turned. Outlaws. Worse. Men with badges who act without law. I went back to report it. 2 nights later, I was chased up here. They never stopped. You stayed hidden for a year? I survived. Waited for them to think I'd frozen. But last week, someone found my trail. She stepped forward. Why didn't you come home? I did. Left my coat. I didn't want them to find you. A crack echoed through the trees. Gunshot. Jonah Dove pulled her down beside him as a second shot ricocheted off the stone. They followed you, he said, face pale. They were waiting. She reached for her rifle. Then we're not hiding anymore. He stared at her, something fierce rising in his eyes. You came alone. She nodded once. He smiled grim proud, and something more. Then they made a mistake. The third shot struck the boulder beside them with a sharp crack that sent flecks of stone against Mara's cheek. She didn't flinch. Jonah had already rolled to the side, pulling his old rifle from the cave wall and checking the chamber with practiced speed. 2, maybe 3, he said under his breath, eyes scanning the ridge above. They'll try to flush us out. Mara crouched beside him, heart steady, jaw set. Then we make them regret it. The winter wind howled between the rocks, carrying with it the whisper of movement, a scrape of boot leather against stone. The outlaws, whoever they truly were, had waited too long, thinking Jonah a ghost and Mara a grieving widow. They had let her come too close, allowed hope to bleed into her silence. Now she was here, and her silence had become a weapon. Jonah motioned to the cave. There's another exit, around back. Tight crawl space. I used it to scout during the summer. We can split them, Mara said. I'll draw them. You flank. He looked at her with something like disbelief, as if seeing her whole for the first time. You're not the same woman I left. No, she said, and neither are you. She broke from cover, rifle held tight against her chest, boots striking hard in the snow. Another shot rang out close, too close, splitting the air over her head as she darted behind a twisted pine. She's got the coat, a voice called out. Eastern accent. Sharp. Surprised. That's her? Another barked. I thought we. You thought wrong. Mara hissed. Jonah disappeared into the rocks behind the cave, while she fired twice, deliberate, low, to keep their heads down. The return fire was scattered, panicked. These weren't mountain men. They were soldiers dressed as ghosts, trained in precision but unready for vengeance. Then came a scream. Short, guttural. A third man shouted, Hawkins. Jonah had found one. Mara pressed forward. She moved low, using the terrain to her advantage. A ridge curved like a half-moon above the clearing. She climbed it fast, snow grabbing at her boots, until she could see them. 2 men crouched behind a fallen tree. They wore government-issue coats dyed black, faces wrapped in scarves. One held a Winchester. The other, taller, leaner, clutched a revolver and scanned the horizon, nerves fraying at the edges. Move up, the tall one said. We need that coat. Orders were clear. Mara aimed for the man with the rifle. She fired once. He fell sideways, groaning, weapon slipping from his grip. The tall one spun around. For one long moment, they locked eyes. You, he spat, stepping forward. The widow. Mara didn't lower her rifle. You buried a man like a dog in Devil's Hollow. Did you think no one would find him? His sneer twisted into something colder. That man was a traitor, and your husband was a fool for watching. He wasn't watching, she said. He was remembering. A shadow moved behind the tall man. Jonah emerged from the rocks, silent as snowfall, his rifle raised. The man never saw it coming. One crack, sharp, final, and he dropped. Jonah stood over the body, face hollow. That's the one who tracked me last spring. I remember his eyes. Mara nodded, stepping beside him. There might be more. Together, they dragged the bodies into the cave, stripping the coats and weapons. Mara studied the gear, standard military issue, modified. The badges were gone, but the stitching remained. Rank, unit, hidden, not forgotten. Why? She whispered. Smugglers, probably. Jonah muttered. Using the mountains to move gold or arms. That man I saw buried, they said he talked. Didn't follow orders. They tried to erase it, she said. Tried to erase you. Jonah leaned against the cave wall. They left me to freeze. I would have if not for Smoke. He came back that first night. Coat still tied to the saddle. I took it and disappeared. Mara's chest tightened. The memory she'd carried for months of finding the coat on the gate. Still warm, no tracks in the snow. It hadn't been a haunting. It had been Jonah, sending her a sign. She stepped closer. You left it for me. I knew you'd come, he said. Outside, the sun began to fall behind the mountain peaks, bathing the snow in cold fire. The wind was quieter now. The trees didn't whisper so loud. Jonah and Mara sat by the fire, the cave walls glowing amber. Between them, a silence thick with all that had passed, the lost time, the nights apart, the truths too sharp to speak aloud. We can't go back, he said finally. Not yet. Whoever gave those orders will come looking. Then we ride south, Mara said. Find names. Tell the truth. They'll call us liars. They already did. He looked at her again. You came alone. She smiled. No, I brought your coat. And for a moment, sitting in the firelight, with the ghosts fading into the dark behind them, it felt like the mountain had given back what it had taken. But far below the ridge, a fourth man crouched in the trees, watching, waiting, and in the dying light, he reached for the badge hidden in his coat pocket, marked with the same insignia Jonah had once carried before the world turned cold. The first time Mara rode back into Southridge with Jonah beside her, no one recognized him. They came at dusk, coats dusted in snow, shadows stretching long across the town's single muddy road. The general store sat shuttered, its sign half-swung on rusted hinges. The saloon still leaked lamplight through its frost-clouded windows, and the sheriff's office, once a place of order, stood quiet, with a single candle burning in the rear. Jonah's face was mostly hidden beneath the scarf, but his eyes watched every rooftop, every window, as if he expected the mountain itself to rise behind him again. They think you're dead, Mara said. Some might like it better that way. I'm counting on it, he muttered. They tied their horses outside the old church, abandoned since the fire 2 winters back, and took the long alley behind the bank. Mara led, steps sure, movements efficient. In the weeks since they'd fought off the mountain assassins, she had grown leaner, harder, like steel drawn in the forge. She spoke less, shot straighter, but in her presence, Jonah had found a rhythm again, a reason to surface from the shadows. They weren't just back for answers. They were back for justice. Inside the blacksmith's barn, 2 men waited. One was Tommy Gresh, barely 17, son of the woman who used to mend clothes behind the bakery. The other, Sam Elders, was a Civil War veteran who'd lost an eye at Antietam and never quite trusted any man with a badge after. Sam stood when Jonah stepped into the light. His one good eye narrowed. I'll be damned, he said. You're not a ghost after all. No, Jonah replied, but I brought a few with me. They gathered around a worn-out crate piled with maps, notes, and a bloodied sleeve Jonah had taken from the man in the mountains. On it, faint and half-burned, was the insignia of the old 12th Cavalry, Jonah's former unit. Recognize it? He asked. Sam nodded slowly. That badge rode through here last spring. Captain Royce. Said he was surveying the hills. Took 3 deputies up the ridge. Came down with only 1. Said the rest froze. And he sent men after me, Jonah said. Tried to make me disappear. Tommy looked pale. Why? Jonah leaned forward. Because I saw them bury a corporal alive. Knew too much. Spoke about gold shipments going missing. Weapons vanishing from Fort Gideon. Royce made it look like an accident. I called him on it. Next day, my orders changed. I was to go up into the high pass alone. Mara set down a battered journal. We've tracked names, locations. They're using ghost towns and army trails to move stolen supplies. It's not just one man. It's a network. Sam whistled low. You aim to bring 'em all down? We aim to start here, Mara said. The plan was simple. Show Jonah's face. Force the hand of those who claimed him dead. Dig up the trail back to Royce and make Southridge the fuse. They began by riding through town at dawn. No guns. No threats. Just two figures from the frost, staring down the men who had signed Jonah's death certificate without a body. Sheriff Alden stepped out into the street, hand hovering over his holster. Well, he said, squinting, either the devil brought you back, or someone's playing dress-up. Jonah dismounted, slow and calm. The devil doesn't wear this face, Sheriff, but he sent men to kill me. Alden's eyes flicked to Mara. You bring trouble, Widow Callahan. She followed the truth, Jonah said. Now the truth follows you. By noon, the saloon was buzzing. A ghost had returned, and with him came questions. Where had he been? Who had tried to kill him? Why did the U.S. cavalry ride, like thieves through the snow? By nightfall, two men rode out of town in haste, one of them a deputy. They were headed for Fort Gideon, just as they'd hoped. Jonah, Mara, Sam, and Tommy followed at a distance, tracking them through back trails. It was a 3-day ride through harsh terrain. On the second day, they spotted another rider, a scout, trained and fast. But by then, the trap was already set. They reached Fort Gideon just before dawn. It wasn't a fort anymore, just an outpost run quiet, forgotten by most. A place meant for storage and rotation. But to Jonah, it was the heart of the rot. The stolen supplies, the false orders, the missing names. Royce's kingdom. They approached under a false flag, claiming to be couriers. When Royce emerged from the barracks, dressed sharp and wearing Jonah's old rank on his shoulder, it was Mara who stepped forward. We've come with a message, she said. Royce frowned. From who? From the mountain, Jonah said, stepping from the shadows. Royce's face went white. By then, Sam had already slipped behind the storehouse, cutting the telegraph wire. Tommy stood guard at the gate with the rifles they'd taken from the ghosts. Inside the command house, Jonah laid out every document, every name, every coat stripped from the corpses of Royce's hired killers. One by one, the truth cut deeper than any bullet. You'll hang for this, Royce spat. You think 4 of you can undo the cavalry? Jonah leaned close. The cavalry don't bury their own and pretend they never lived. Royce reached for his pistol. Mara shot first. It was clean. Quick. Just. They didn't run. They stayed long enough for the wire to be repaired. Long enough to speak with the quartermaster. Long enough to find 2 honest names and send the evidence east. When they returned to Southridge, it was not as ghosts. It was as the ones who came back. Jonah never put the uniform on again. He built a small cabin outside the edge of town, where the land was quiet and the wind spoke softer through the trees. Mara moved in beside him, not as a widow, but as something stronger. The mountains still whispered. The snow still came. But neither of them feared what they could not see anymore, because justice had worn a familiar face, and it had returned.